For our second and final forum of the evening, and it's also the final forum of the primary season for the Cherokee County Republican Women.
That's for last.
Okay, we saved the best for last. This is the forum for the Georgia Secretary of State race. This is a critical statewide office responsible for overseeing elections, maintaining business records, and ensuring the integrity of many systems that keep our state running. We are pleased to have 3 candidates with us tonight, and we thank them for taking the time to be here to engage directly with their Cherokee County voters. 2 candidates, Mr. Vernon Jones and Mr. Tim Fleming, were unable to attend due to, well, one was a prior commitment and one kind of got stuck up in Athens. We'll follow the same format as before. There'll be opening statements, questions from the press, and again, for those of y'all that were not here for the first forum, the editor of the Tribune, Shannon Ballou, has given our past president, Mrs. Pat Wallace, a list of questions. So she will be reading off questions from the press. For those of you that were not here at the first forum, or for those of you that were here during the first forum and didn't follow the rules, no booing or disruptions. Please hold your applause until the end of the forum. Audience questions. We have cards up at the front here. You must write your question respectfully, legibly, and relevant to the office. It has to be directed to every candidate. Print your name on the back of the card. The questions will be reviewed by our vetting committee for compliance. Duplicate questions already asked by the press will be excluded. Please bring your cards up to the desk here and we'll give them to the vetting committee. Let's continue in the same attentive spirit and respect that we had for our first candidates. All right, candidates, starting with Mr. King, please give your 2-minute opening.
Sure. First, let me say thank you all for spending so much time today to hear all these different candidates. Just a quick background on me. I'm Georgia born and raised. I graduated from Public High School in Cherokee County. I was a pretty good student, a good athlete, and I was able to get an appointment to the Air Force Academy. That changed my life because I had a pretty challenging upbringing. Divorce in my house, domestic violence, grew up abusing my father. So going to the Air Force Academy was just a great blessing for me, and it did change my life. I was an all-conference football player there, but that doesn't matter. What I did was I graduated and went into the Air Force as a contracting officer and served proudly. I started my own construction company afterwards. I've won awards as the fastest growing business in Georgia. I have offices in 3 counties. I have real employees, and I'm bringing that mindset to the Secretary of State's office. This office is an underperforming office. It's not sustaining success. It's not status quo. We've got to fix this office, and I have a plan to fix it. My proposal is first on day one, I'm going to establish core values. My core values, my Air Force core values of integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. That's going to be the new core values of the Secretary of State's office under a King administration. And then we're going to proceed to exit the Dominion contract if it's still in place, which it probably will be, but at this particular House, General Assembly. We're going to hand mark paper ballots. We're going to follow all of the election integrity rules that a lot of you patriots rake to find out and determine the challenges that we've had in our election system. I'm going to make sure that our office services our business community, and I'm going to make sure that we serve versus we demanding or tyranny or the lack of service that we've been getting from this office. We're going to focus on you. That is the citizen of Georgia. And under King administration, you can count on that. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ted Metz. Some of you already know me. For those that don't, I wear my hair long because I lost this side of my head to cancer, so I just cover it up with my hair. So don't be focused on my hair, listen to my words. I have been fighting at the Georgia legislature since 2012 showing up at committee hearings, showing up at state election board meetings, fighting for Georgia's better election system. We have not had a legal constitutional voting system since prior to Kathy Cox. Everything, you can look at the history of how everything has gone since Kathy Cox went to the Diebold direct recording devices. The State Commission hearing heard lots of testimony from lots of experts that we should not have an electronic voting system, that we should have hand-marked paper ballots. And what did they do? They gave us a contract that was not enforceable from the get-go, because in 2020, Judge Totenberg in the Curling versus Raffensperger case ordered basically that the Dominion system did not comply with Georgia law. The legislature has had 6 years to comply with both the federal and the state election laws. They have not done that. So it's like the first thing I'm going to do is apply to USC 9, that's 2 US Code 9, which basically states that all elections for representatives shall be on paper ballots, marked in paper or pen, all others being of no account. The only mention of machines that they have in that law is a lever machine, mirrored in Georgia law. There's no authorization, federal or state, for electronic voting systems. Now, you can find out a lot more about me at tedmetz.com. I've been at this for a very long time. I have filed lawsuits federally and state, and I've won several different aspects of cleaning up elections in Georgia. Check me out.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here today. And I'm thankful we do have this format. I thought the Terry should concerned I might have to cancel it, but we weren't having a lot of people saying they were coming. And I'm glad that my erstwhile fellow candidates are here as well. I'm thankful for every candidate who ever puts their name on the ballot, because it takes a lot of guts and courage to do it, one way or the other. I've been involved in public politics in the state for 40 years. My very first campaign was 1986. I was 15 years old. I was at Riverwood High School in Fulton County. I was volunteering McMahon in his campaign. And I helped to make St. Louis City. I've helped bring governments closer, more local. I've helped Johns Creek, Milton, and I believe in local government being strong. But I have one thing that no other candidate on the stage can say. When we helped to write the election integrity law, SB 202, Election Integrity Act, I was in the room. I'm the only candidate who's been in the courtroom fighting Stacey Abrams, fighting Joe Biden's Justice Department, and fighting the entire world when they came and said, we're going to take your all-star game away. And we ended up winning all the way through that. We won every single case, defending every election integrity law that we had passed. SB 189, I helped to write that. I've been in the room fighting for these, winning over and over, and beating Stacey Abrams, and beating Joe Biden's Justice Department. And whatever we do in this office, the liberals are going to come. If we go too far, if we do things that are outside the bounds of the law, a federal liberal, Obama or Biden judge will have writing our law for us. We want the legislature to be in charge. Do they always make the best decisions sometimes? I don't think so. But it takes leadership in this office working with the legislature, because this is an executive agency. We can only apply the law that's freely given to us. So that is the reality of this office. I've helped to reform this office and increase the output of licenses. We took nursing from 100 days we got there, 45 days through processing changes. I changed the system. We got to 10. My team came back, so we got to 6. And that's just the start. The ethic and ethos that we have is always measure, always improve, always make it better. And as Gabriel Sterling, Adjunct Secretary of State, will do that.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And now we're going to start with our questions from the press. Thank you, Ms. Pat.
The first question is, what would you do to encourage trust in Georgia's election system? Mr. King.
What would I do to ensure trust in Georgia's election system? I would follow the law, first of all. When we walk to a polling location and we cast a vote, we show our ID, we get a card, stick the card inside the BMV, the ballot marking device. We select who we want to vote for, and we get print ballot. That ballot, at that moment in time, we're supposed to be able to verify our vote on that ballot. That's what the law says. Now, we walk over and we put our ballot inside the scanner, and our poll worker says, when that number clicks, that means your ballot has been counted. But that scanner doesn't read QR code. So, what I'm going to do is make sure the QR code is removed. I'm going to make sure that our original source document is a piece of paper that that the voter filled out, that way we're always able to audit it. If there's any funny business, you can always go back to the original source document. And that is going to ensure trust in our elections, along with cleaning up our voter rolls. I'm going to mandate that our counties clean up our voter rolls routinely, and we will support them in that under a key administration.
It's really as easy as designing a ballot that is easy to hand tabulate, like it says in the Georgia Election Code, section 21-437. Doing it hand counted, hand marked, hand counted at the precinct in public view, not only in public view, but broadcast by cameras over the internet so everyone can watch the ballot count. It's so simple, it's easy. Go to a-count, C-O-U-T, -able, ABLE.com, accountable, and it will show a demonstration of using a properly designed ballot and a properly designed tally sheet to hand count the elections on election day at the precinct in full public view. And that's the easiest way to restore trust. Everyone can watch, everyone can participate.
We have to have clean voter lists. Since we came into office, as Secretary Rapsberger, I was the COO for 7 years, we have amended, canceled, or corrected 4.4 million voter registrations in the state. We're down right now about 7.25 million active voters and another 800,000 or so inactive voters. The reason we absolutely, if we know if somebody is not there anymore, we legally, under federal law, under the National Voter Registration Act, cannot remove those people without going through the process. It's insane, it's dumb, and we've been going to, it's 2019, up to DC to tell them have to reform this act because we have technology now. This is by mail and ink. Secondarily, hand-marked paper ballots are much more manipulatable than any ballot marking device ballot. And trying to hand count them in the precinct, you're asking for human beings to do even more processes. The most fundamentally flawed part of any system is going to be human actor on these things, unfortunately. And humans are terrible counting things. Rice University says the average human count will be off by 1 to 2%. And in a state like Georgia, that's too close.
Second question. Do you support expanding, keeping, or reducing early voting and no excuse absentee voting in Georgia, and why?
Can you repeat that?
Sure.
Should we start with Mr. Metz?
Yes. Do you support
I have
expanding?
a question, I'll be able to answer it for you. So, you ready?
Let me repeat it for.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Do you support expanding, keeping, or reducing early voting and no excuse absentee voting in Georgia, and why?
First and foremost, Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution places the legislators of every state to pass laws for time, place, and manner. The second sentence is, but at any time Congress may make by law any changes to the manner or the time. The time is set as the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November. That is election day. There's nothing in federal law that expands the election day beyond that. Absentee voting is kind of one of those things, you know, he talks about paper ballots being like manipulatable and hackable, etc. But when it comes down to it, the only people that should have absentee votes are people that actually need it. Crippled people that can't get to the polls, people who are traveling, and soldiers. Everyone else should show up on election day and vote at the polls like we've done for 200 or more years. This electronic voting and early voting is a strain on our system.
I believe we have an appropriate amount of early voting right now because one of the great things about the early voting is it gets rid of all of our lines on election day. The secondary thing about that is when there are threats to election day, which are real now. I've had to talk to FBI and DHS about the fact that they will the possibility of drones spraying pipe bombs on the top of buildings now. If it happened, we're down to one single day. That means that threat can actually have a very real impact. One specifically on absentee vote, we have to make sure that Georgia is leader on already. But we're about to hopefully have a Supreme Court case that comes down that says you can't accept absentee ballots 40 days, weeks, months after the fact like California does. We need at a federal level of those especially. I'm hoping the Supreme Court comes down on it. They may not. But if they don't, we have to work with our federal legislators and to make sure that nationwide we can do that. Because right now, we have to wait for weeks and months on occasion to know exactly the outcome of things. But as close as Congress is now, we can't accept that anymore.
Third question.
That's fine. Okay, so go ahead. That's fine. As much as I really want to increase trust in our elections, that question right there is really more on the General Assembly side. So as a Secretary of State, I will press hard to our legislature to reduce our early voting days. I think we have 2 year early voting days. If our elections were run smoothly, if we didn't have the issues with our elections, if y'all trusted our elections, I wouldn't have that position. But we have too many irregularities in our elections. We haven't had a good, sound election or an election year without any fraud or any kind of irregularities since 2020. So we're in a crisis moment right now. The Secretary of State needs to take leadership and say, hey, legislature, let's reduce these days. Hey, legislature, let's stop the automatic registration when you get your driver's license. Let's make sure we take control of our voting rolls and our voting population so that we have the trusted elections again.
So this question will go to Mr. Sturl.
Third question. What is your view of the federal government suing Georgia for access to the state voters registration list and up the FBI's raid of a Fulton County elections office earlier this year?
Fulton County raid cutting executable warrants, so they've been forced to comply, obviously. The basis of that warrant has come under question by some people, but now the FBI has it. They can look at those things that have looked at. So hopefully the FBI will examine it and see that the election outcome, while unfortunate in terms of the outcome of Biden winning, was ultimately correct. Secondarily, the lawsuit of getting access to the PI, they have access, and the office offered them access to the publicly available records, but the PI is in violation of a single federal code I can't remember right now, and basically we are not allowed under state law to hand over without having a warrant in place to do that, and they haven't produced that. That's why we're going through the lawsuit process right now. And in every other state that they've tried that, they have lost. So right now we have to make sure that we keep it, because one of the things they want us to do is sign a contract to give it to a third-party vendor that we do not know who it is. And that was one thing that we could not do under state law.
Well, I think currently we don't follow state law because we actually share our PII with a third-party entity called ERIC. Eric, as a Secretary of State, I'm going to remove ourselves from the ERIC's database. I'm going to sign direct intergovernmental services agreement with states. I can do that because I actually have I have a contract with other states that has an intergovernmental services agreement. I understand how that process works. And in terms of personal identifiable information, if we keep that information within the states, it'll be secure. I don't really trust third-party entities. In fact, I don't even trust the Secretary of State to do their job. I believe that the State Elections Board needs to provide oversight. I just need to make sure that we understand that any government can be corrupt. We've got to make sure we provide oversight, training, controls around our government. The Secretary of State seat is not my seat or Raphael's seat, it's your seat. And it's the people's will that has to be executed. And we need a leader that actually understands that.
Me and my law partner filed motions into both the USB Shea Alexander and the FBI raid at the Fulton County warehouse. And our basic motivation for doing that was two things. First of all, the law that they used, the 20701 statute, was about voter rights. It didn't have anything to do about the actual election administration. So that was one thing we filed. The other thing we filed is that in 2020, the poll tapes, the tabulator tapes were coming out, and it said, we, the undersigned, certify this election under the Local Authorities Elections Act, which is a Canadian law. In other words, the 2020 election was not certifiable because there was nothing on the poll tape that gave them the authority under Georgia law to certify in the first place. So the raid was important because if they actually looked at the evidence that was collected, from the election, then they would know that no election actually occurred and it was all fraud.
Question number 4, Colonel Grass. What changes, if any, would you make to how the Secretary of State's office manages professional licensing?
Good customers, good king.
Sure. I'm actually one of the few people here who has a license. I'm a licensed general contractor. I'm a builder. And I've held my license for many, many years. And when I announced to run for Secretary of State, I got tons of phone calls complaining about how slow the office is when it comes to turning around licenses. We've actually discouraged people from opening businesses here in Georgia. They go to Chattanooga to open their business. So as Secretary of State, that's sensitive to me because that's how we make our living. You can't slow down people's license and expect them to be able to make a living for themselves. So we've got to turn around our licensing very, very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install what I call industry liaisons. Industry liaisons are going to be installed initially up front to take phone calls, to guide people when they call to get information on how to get their license or what steps they need to take. Even the website is not easily downloadable. So they'll be able to kind of handhold businesses when they call into the Secretary of State's office until we get the website up to speed, until we change our processes. But immediately, I'm going to implement industry liaisons to help our businesses.
Licensing essentially is a legislative function, number one. And number two, it is given to the 42 different boards that oversee all the different licensing. Under Georgia law, all of the licensing is handled by the boards. The Secretary of State is only there to collect the fee and take a check. There is nothing really that the Secretary of State can do to influence the boards. It's not authorized by Georgia law. All the Secretary of State's office can do is help facilitate the licensing process. That means just like making it easier to go online and fill out the form, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, the Secretary of State office can only hire a division chief to make sure that the divisions are working properly. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot that the Secretary of State can do in licensing. Sorry to tell you the truth about that, but that's the way it is.
Licensing is based on 100-year-old laws, 75-year-old rules that change constantly to the 40 different boards, and the boards are the ones that actually issue these. One of the things that I have local legislation already on is wanting to do an administrative issue. Essentially, if you pass your college, you pass the board, and you meet the age requirements, and you pass a criminal background check, we should be able to issue a license, period. The board should be there with their expertise if there's an enforcement issue, if there's a problem, if something is happening. One of the worst boards right now truly is the General Contractors Board. They are subjective in their rules. They're all over the board. I walk into a meeting of the governor's office and says, I think we should blow up the whole damn thing. And let the market work it out. But we have these health and safety rules, and before I left, we worked with the governor's office to go to every single board and say, the Supreme Court is saying do health and safety only and financial protection. We need to make sure all those rules follow that, and that all the workloads are the same for all of the boards, so we can move people from space to space if there's going to be a rush. And what happens if we have graduations, there's a rush. Well, like I said, we've already taken nursing from 100 days to 45 days to 60 days, and the rules from 4 days to 1 minute. So we've made a lot of changes already.
This is the last question. Are there any changes to state law that you would support related to the Secretary of State's office and would ask the General Assembly to pursue?
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear all of it.
Are there any changes to state law that you would support related to the Secretary of State's office and would ask the General Assembly to pursue?
That's a great question. The answer is there's so many different things I don't know exactly where to start. But one, first and foremost, the Secretary of State's office is essentially the archiver of all things. One thing that I would really like to see is the implementation of something called the Good Governance Guarantee that requires audits, affidavits, and transparency in government. The transparency part is that everything that happens in this legislature and any other administrative office, including the judicial system, to be online, available instead of the FOIA request stuff. It should be online for public view immediately. The affidavits is that before any government employee within the state of Georgia gets a paycheck, they have to sign an affidavit that they did not see anything bad going on. Nothing illegal, nothing unconstitutional, nothing corruptible. And then they have to go with the audits, affidavits, and transparency. The audits is the fiscal audits as well as constitutional audits to make sure that our laws are compliant with federal and state law.
The biggest one would be the licensing side right now. Basically, the Secretary of State's office serves as basic secretaries and administrative support to the boards. We need to flip that relationship. The secretary used to be in an administrative position to move quickly. That's a very specific one. Another deep in the weeds one is around our procurement for technology contracts. Right now, we have dozens and dozens of different technology contracts that DOAS has, Department of Administrative Services, how they do not exceed on some of those. The issue that we have around those is that different agencies are paying different rates for the same services. I think we could probably save up to $500 million a year if we negotiated those better and had clawback agreements like we have in the current ones in the Secretary of State's office. And then finally, on the election side, we need to make sure that the certification is done directly, was done properly, and we work with, and we have to work with the counties specifically because they are the ones who do the groundwork every single time. We clear those out confinedly, put us back on the SCD because constitutionally, the board candidates is the constitutional officer.
Okay, I'll actually answer this earlier. I'm going to petition the General Assembly to make sure that the early voting days are reduced. I think that there's way too many early voting days, and I think you just open yourself up to vulnerabilities. I'll also petition them to make the driver's license process an opt-in versus opt-out process. Just because you get a license doesn't mean this year that's insane. In fact, if you pay attention to the state election board meetings, like I do, you see time and time again cases of people that didn't even know they were registered to vote, and they voted, and something illegal happened with their registration. So that is definitely where I would focus on. And I just wanted to touch on something real quick. We know that our elections are not well run because Fulton County their ballots were seized by the FBI. It's because the numbers didn't match up. That's why they seized the ballots. They wanted to make sure that they could go to these original source documents to bring the truth out.
All right, that concludes our press questions. Then we'll move on to audience questions. The first question will go to Mr. Sterling. Other than elections, name 4 things that fall under the umbrella of the Secretary of State.
Investigations, which basically allows us to do all of our other items, securities, which will be security regulations for financial planners and things like that. Corporations, we file, basically, anybody in an LLC or an INC, they file with us. And the reality of that's not really a business license, so that anybody can find you to sue you if you do something. That's why we have those there. That's why you pay $50 every year. So 1, 2, 3, we're talking about the securities, investigations, elections, charities. We're going to do charities as well. That's tied to the security side. There's a lot of tangential things that we do. We do the archive side. Basically, every rule that comes to the state has to be published in the end by the Secretary of State's office. Those are a lot of the main functions that we have.
All right, Mr. King.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, securities, honestly. The Secretary of State's office is responsible for the administration of the Securities Act, and we know that they dropped the ball because we understand the First Ability loans collapse last summer happened because the Secretary of State's office, well, the leaders of that business, they ran a bad Ponzi scheme. But the Secretary of State's office hadn't reviewed their license in over 10 years. I can't operate my construction company like that without that kind of oversight. So I don't know what they're doing. I mean, the bottom line is that the Secretary of State's office needs to do their job, first of all. But securities, licensing, corporations, charities, and obviously elections, which is the most divisive, the most important, in my opinion, priority of this election cycle.
Seems like that's answered. I couldn't answer any better. That's divisions of the Secretary of State's office: corporations, licensing, elections, securities, charities. I know the Gabe's investigations, but that's part of all the different divisions. So other than that, I can't really add to that because there's nothing more to add. That's all he does. But I really kind of think the Secretary of State should also be out there in the community, trying to teach people how government works, trying to make sure that the kids understand civics, make sure that people know where to go to get problems solved. I think the Secretary of State also needs to work with the Attorney General's office very closely to make sure that seniors aren't getting scammed. And that's about all I have to say about that.
All right. Our next question, we will start with Mr. King. Would you support pre-certification audits by the election boards?
Yes, I would. I think that right now our counties are not getting the kind of support they need from the Secretary of State's office. Our counties are getting beat down because they're not really conducting elections to the level that the people expect them to conduct at. So when it comes to pre-certification audits, that's actually part of our solution. Our solution is on election night, precinct level, we're going to count our ballots to make sure that the machine tabulations comes out correctly. And there shouldn't be any complaints about that because we have 7 days to certify. So I'm going to make sure that every county has trusted election outcomes because I'm going to train them, I'm going to support it, I'm going to give everything they need, but I'm going to hold them accountable to follow our rules, to follow the Secretary of State's rules when it comes to election day certification, or when it comes to election day voting and certification.
Okay, pre-certification audits, that what was also needs to be covered is to make sure that all the poll managers and poll workers know every aspect of Georgia election code, every policy and procedure that they're supposed to know in order to maintain a good connection to the public and run their elections smoothly. It's not just about the equipment, it's also about the personnel. And furthermore, it's also about the location of each precinct. A lot of people don't remember that the precincts are actually part of our military militia districts, which we really need to go back and enforce again. And then on top of that, I'm going to make a prediction that up to 5% of the election equipment is going to fail on election day because that's just how electronics work. It's old stuff and it's not going to work. So a lot of the counties are going to need to be supplied with emergency paper ballots on this election cycle. So beyond the certification, we need to run the machines through several cycles because we don't know if the programming allows the machine to change votes after so many votes have already been cast. We need to dig deeper into all of that.
Yes. The main answer is yes. The county wants to do that, and I would love to get to work with it on the system that is similar across all the counties. The issue we have is with all 3 counties, 7 days is tight to get everything done they're already mandated to do. So I think we should probably go back to the old time where we have 10 days to certify at the county level, and that would give them that extra room. Smaller counties can do it because just the sheer volume is up here, but large counties like Cherokee, Forsyth, and Gwinnett, would have a hard time doing additional auditing on top of the stuff we already mandate a lot to do. Every single ballot machine is actually checked against the golden record on the election manager's side, and they're all done with a lot of accuracy testing in public before every single election, not every election cycle, of every single election. So we do a lot of these processes already, and they're in the rules, and some are in the code. So I would love to see more audits because more audits always yields more trust.
All right. Our next question, we'll start with Mr. Metz. Polk County is a mess. What are you planning to do to fix their Board of Elections?
I didn't hear the whole question.
Fulton County is a mess. What are you planning to do to fix their Board of Elections?
Well, that's a really great question because again, this is partially a legal question, and is also partially an authorities of the Secretary of State's question. The authority of the Secretary of State really isn't there because under Georgia law, the authority for elections administration as well as voter registration falls to the county. The Secretary of State shouldn't be in it to begin with. He's only got an oversight position. So of course, trying to get the Carter Center out of it, trying to get some of these old staffer attorneys out of it, trying to train the county attorneys in the actual law rather than somebody else's policy and procedure. Those are the steps that we need to take to return the power to the people at the county level to begin with. Because people are the government, right? We need to get in there, and the people need to go to the county boards of elections and make them understand that we know what the game is and we are there to fix it.
No one on the stage has ever worked with Fulton County accountable for me my entire career. In 1990, I helped run the recall against Michael Lomax, the Fulton County Commission chairman. In 2005, I was the co-chair when the campaign to make Sandy Springs a city and break away from Fulton County. I also helped do Johns Creek and Milton cities in the same county. I've also worked part of the Fulton County monitor on the ground in Fulton County after their meltdown in the primary of 2020. So that's what we've done a lot of those already. The problem we have right now is there's state law, basically, that allows the county commissioners to turn down the Fulton County party's nominees. That's the issue we run into. You can't just put them on there. And part of the issue is the constitutional issue at the bottom of this, basically saying political party entities cannot just place people on these boards. So there's going to have to be a way to hold them accountable. The only mechanism right now for availing counties for the state election board, after having an investigation and a vote, to go in and put the new board in place for an individual to run those counties. That's the only way to change what's going on. There's a threat actor to make them do better.
Mr. King?
Well, as Secretary of State, I think I have several levels, right? Even though I don't administer elections, I can put pressure on the counties. I can put pressure on the counties directly through the Secretary of State's office. I can also provide information and disclosure and transparency. I can request documents from the county that shows that they are operating outside of the rules of the state of Georgia. When the state elections board, which I actually think that it should be a standalone board that provides oversight over the Secretary of State's office. I don't agree with anybody having unvetted ballot. I just don't trust people. Our forefathers didn't either. That's why we have checks and balances. The Secretary of State's office needs to provide, the SCB board needs to provide checks and balances over the Secretary of State's office. They can also work with the Secretary of State's office. They've had good workplaces and put pressure on Fulton County because the State Elections Board does have authorities that they can do certain things over the county. So there's ways. If you have the will, that's the one thing I talk about a lot. If you have the will to do it, you get it done.
Our next question, we will start with Mr. Sterling. What is your stand on Sharia law and its process moving forward in the U.S. and Georgia?
Secretary of State's a little out of bounds of this one, but Sharia law is obviously anathema to the values we have in the United States of America. And I know it's talking a lot of these things. I don't think there's anybody on this stage, who ever sat on this stage, who would never say, that's a really great idea we should allow in this country. I mean, the idea that it's somehow going to be instituted through Georgia law is insane. Now, what steps can be taken legally to keep it out? I mean, you're going to have people who believe in it because that's part of what their faith is. If they can practice it, they can't force everybody else to do those same things. So I think it's a terrible idea. It's anathema to our culture. There are people who follow Sharia who declare jihad on our nation. And again, it's pretty straightforward. Sharia law is insane.
Mr. King?
Yes, my background, my military service, my love for country clearly says that there's no room, no place for Sharia law in the United States at all. It makes no sense. In fact, I would petition our legislature to pass a rule or law that makes that illegal in Georgia, similar to what Florida did. So I think I don't want to rag on the state legislature, but they really didn't do a good job this last cycle. I mean, we have election integrity bills that were sitting around that had passed, that's just sitting around. We actually have someone run for office for to be Secretary of State, and he's in the legislature. It's just sitting around, election integrity, whatever. It's just for you crazy people. That is not going to happen under the King administration. Just so you know, everyone's will in here will be heard and will be executed upon. But anyhow, there's no Sharia law anywhere around the King administration.
First and foremost, we were founded as a Christian nation. Apparently, we're supposed to have been obedient to God. And I don't know what happened over the years, but because of the influence of Marxism, churches and families have been destroyed. And now this new wave of basically the global cabal trying to force Sharia into the United States is the method of tearing the fabric of America apart. and we definitely need to stop it. I'm all for freedom of religion, but keep it in your bedroom. Don't bring it out on the street. You know, like Jesus commanded, you should be praying in private. Go pray in private. I don't want to know what you're doing. Don't proselytize to do Sharia stuff to me. As Secretary of State, you actually have the authority to keep Islamic candidates off the ballot. That's one of the things that ballot access was passed for in the 1940s, was to keep communists off the ballot in Georgia. We can simply keep Sharia at least in check by keeping Sharia candidates off the ballot.
Okay. This next question will start with Mr. King. Name one election law you would repeal, even if your party supports it.
Use of the new voting system. I don't trust these single source election systems that don't have access or has too much access or hidden access. People talk about, well, if we go to hand on paper ballots, it's going to be too much work on the poll workers. We have to take care of our county workers. I'm thinking to myself, what are you talking about? That makes no sense to me. A poll worker doesn't have to carry around heavy equipment. They don't have to make sure that the BMDs are set up properly. They don't have to make sure that the scanners are set up. All they have to worry about is paper. It's not extra work. Yeah, it's extra counting. But in terms of the balance of work, the trade-off of how much work they have to do under this system that they don't even understand, that they've got to call technicians in to do simple things on it, the amount of work that takes versus just paper, I think I'm willing to take that trade-off. I think most lawyers are willing to take that trade-off.
I would start, excuse me, by repealing HB 316. HB 316 was the bill that authorized the purchase of a new electronic voting system. Every bill subsequent to HB 316 has caused enormous harm to the trust of Georgians in our elections and basically has led to uncertifiable elections since 2020. That would be the first and foremost thing I would do. In 2020, there was two significant lawsuits. One was Curley versus Raffensperger. The other was Roden versus Clark County. Amy Totenberg and Curley versus Raffensperger said our election system was not constitutional. Roden versus Athens-Clark County reemphasized that Georgia's elections are held under the paper ballot standards, as I quoted before, under the Georgia election law 21-2-437. All we need to do is re-implement 21-2-437 and we're done.
The biggest one for me of the national law was the National Voter Registration Act. You don't repeal it, but have to update, because right now it's getting in the way of us doing the best practices of keeping our lists up to date. It doesn't allow us to use new technologies to know where people move. And like I said, it literally is based on pen and mail, because they didn't have the internet at the time. We know that 11% of Americans move every single year. That's just the reality of it. A couple other things that I've heard said on the stage tonight is people want to get away from the opt-out versus opt-in on automatic voter registration. That is not a state law. That is the Attorney General's office. It made an interpretation of federal law. And that's a federal law in several states that says it has to be an opt-out system. And that's where we sit right now in Georgia. So it's not a state law that can be passed to emerging events. So we have to understand the realities of all the mix of laws that we are within.
All right. Our next question, and we will start with Mr. Metz. What concrete changes would you make to Georgia's voting system in your first year?
I would re-implement 21-2-437, which is the rules about how to conduct an election. It's simple. It's never been repealed. It's never been amended. And everything that's been put on subsequent to that is Band-Aids over a problem that never needed a Band-Aid in the first place. So that's the easiest thing to do. Under Georgia election law, the Secretary of State is responsible for supplying the ballot to the counties as well as tabulator sheets. And that's all we have to do is retrain the staff. In the recount in 2022, over 40,000 volunteers volunteered to help recount the elections. We need to go back to the public involvement in elections. Get volunteers to come and count votes on election day. You know, all of this legislative fluff just seems to feed people who have companies that supply temporary staffing. We need to get rid of that.
You read the question one more time.
Sure.
Well, I got one conference desk. Should be a second. Sorry, I'm trying to get it. The main thing we have to do is, right now, HB 316 and SB 202 and SB 189 are the law of the land. So the very first specific thing we have to do is figure out how do we get rid of the conflicting law right now. Because one law says you have to go to the VMD. That's the law. That's flat out the law. Clark County tried to get away from it. They were forced to go to the VMDs, the ballot marking devices. It also says we cannot use a QR code to tabulate. There's a very simple and elegant way to get out of this issue that we're in right now. Because there's going to be a special session unless we want a judge to write the rules for us. And we feel we want has a high risk, and I don't like high risks on that. The easiest thing to do is we already have an optical character recognition software in place that we can use to count the ballots after we run the regular scans that we have. And that way we can know the outcomes, we can see the outcomes, and we're not using QR code to count. We're using the actual written word on the ballot. That'd be the first easiest thing to do. We're going to do it for $300,000. That's it. Not millions of dollars to change the whole system.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to immediately remove us from the name contract. I'm going to immediately go to emergency procedures to do hand mark paper ballots. I'm going to also work to have the QR code removed, and I'm going to help train our staff, the SOS staff and the county staff, so that we can conduct our elections in a more trusted and public fashion. At the same time, I'm going to make sure that our voter rolls are clean. We're going to remove ourselves from the hearing system. We're going to sign hands up on services agreement. We're going to make sure that the counties do more routine updates on the voter rolls. I'm going to work with the DDS to make sure that any kind of movement with addresses are recorded. And I'm going to make sure that all the neighboring states around Georgia, the states that people move in and out the most, that I definitely have agreements with them, because that is where that's what the errors are making.
All right, our next question, we will start with Mr. Sterling. Do you believe Georgia has struck the right balance between voter access and election security?
Yes.
Mr. King?
No.
Okay, you want to get 1 minute to answer this question?
You get a minute.
We actually have no election security, because anything that's on the internet, anything that's accessible by the internet, anything that's accessible by a password and a username on some server in the cloud is not secure. No matter what they tell you, it is not secure. Nothing electronic is secure. Only paper is secure, because paper cannot be hacked. As far as voter access goes, I think we do have pretty good voter access as far as that goes. You know, anyone can register to vote if they're properly proved their citizenship. That's great. One of the problems we have is non-enforcement of citizen requirements to actually register to vote. All you need is a driver's license and a power bill. Now, as far as voter access is, we have, again, our voting precincts are based on militia districts. We need to go back through and make sure we have an adequate number of precincts so that everyone can go to the polls on election day.
All right, this next question will start with Mr. King. What reforms would you make to improve Georgia's business registration system?
On the business side, immediately I'm going to focus on it because it's so key to, how we make a living here in our state. So, in addition to the industry liaisons that I explained to you earlier, that's going to be able to basically handhold, whatever term you want to use, but help guide people when they call and they have questions. They're not going to give legal advice. I'm not hiring a bunch of attorneys. It's just help assist us because we've held so long without having help. I'm going to make sure that the making office is open so that we have regional support. I don't know what's been going on with that office. And I'm going to make sure that we do and we serve the people of Georgia the way that we're supposed to, the way the law requires. And what we say, we're going to make sure we stand behind the direction that we give to our citizenry, to anyone who calls the Secretary of State's office. We're going to be a service-oriented office.
You specifically asked about business licenses and not professional licenses, right? Because the answer to the business licenses, the last business license I got recently, you just go online, you fill out a form, you pay a check, and you wait until your license is issued. There's not really a problem with licensing with business licensing. The problem, again, is professional licensing, and again, that's up to the boards. So to be a liaison between the boards and the actual professional licensing process is a matter of observing where the bottlenecks are, and then asking the legislature to fix it, because the legislature is in charge of the boards. I have 30 seconds, but I have nothing else to say.
All right, Ms. Easter.
Brevity is appreciated at this point, I'm sure. The reality is we need a new corporation system. The one we have now is a little bit long in the tooth. It has been Balin, Wire, holding it together for the last 3 cycles we had the annual registrations. One other thing I want to be able to do has to do with basically doing partnerships with counties. Because right now, once you start your business and you file online here in Georgia, there's not really much else done, but then you have to figure out, how do I navigate my county? How do I navigate my city? Do I need a health inspection? Do I need to do, X amount of these? How do I set up my sales tax stuff? I have to fill out all these forms. And there's no one-stop shop in Georgia to help businesses really get started. And it has to start the cities, the counties, the states all together. So I've wanted to put together an entrepreneurial toolkit that allows you, if you're doing this kind of business and you go by NAICS codes, which is something that we have, to go through and say, this is what you have to do. And the rules and the laws are different in every county, but we have systems in place now with AI that let us actually figure a lot of that stuff out and help small businesses start and grow with the state.
Okay, our next question, we'll start with Mr. Metz. Would you be in favor of the legislator approving a law to go back to 10 days between Election Day and county certification? This would give counties time to complete all requirements.
All right, I'm going to go back to the 8 Count Able website and let you watch how it's actually done. Hand counted ballots using a caller and tallier, which means 2 people are sitting there reading off the names on the ballot and putting it on a big spreadsheet that you count right there. 2 people are doing it on the spreadsheet, 2 people are doing the counting in public. You can immediately pinpoint any mistakes right then, right then. It's as soon as you're done with the batch of ballots, you know whether or not you have the proper results. And if you don't, it's easy to fix it in small batches right there on the spot at the exact same time that you're looking through the ballots and looking at the tabulator sheet. But in general, if we're still using the electronic system, then yes, I think 10 days is better to certify it.
I want to thank John for that question. He's on your election support here. We've talked about this many, many times. I mentioned this earlier as something that would be in favor of changing the law on right now. When we moved it back to 7, I think the legislature was trying to solve a problem that didn't really exist to these faster. People don't care about certification faster. They care about results faster. And one of the main things that we found that breeds, faith in the outcome is the speed with which we can identify movements. That's the main thing that you do it. So certification, and given all the new things they've been asked to do, it's a lot of work, especially for larger counties. It's really large counties have resources. Small counties do it. It's the medium-sized counties that are stretched because of the number of ballots they have, precincts, but they don't have the resources the big counties have. So that's where this extra 3 days to allow them to do their own internal auditing would be a very big help, I think.
The way I view it is that if you run your elections well, the way I explained, hand marked paper ballots, precinct level counting, I would think you necessarily need to extend the verification period. I think 7 days is sufficient, but it's debatable. But the bottom line is that I want to make sure that our elections are accurate. Speed is important. We want to know on election night, we want to know the results. I do. And you will have results under my solution. But not until we verify, you can call it audit, you can call it what we're going to call it, but we're going to count every ballot to make sure that it matches whatever that tabulation machine shows. And I always want to remind everyone is that, like, your vote, who you voted for, is always secret. But when we count those votes, we need to count those votes in public. And that will be a King administration process.
All right, guys, we have 3 more questions. This next question will start with Mr. Sterling. There's been lots of conversation about voting systems. We have machines. We have a paper ballot backup that reconciles with the machines. What are your thoughts about paper only that would not have a check or balance?
Sort of a twisted question. I think I get it. Essentially, I think the system we have in place right now, it's not tallies that are kept on the machines. Remember, the screen doesn't tally. The paper ballot is what's counted when it's put into the scanner. And that would be the same in a hand-marked ballot solution as well. It's the same outcome. And you're double checking that. I think if you have a hand count after the fact, a post-certification audit, which you do with a risk limiting audit, a secondary audit that we already have in place, it looks at every single ballot, every single contest. We did it in 2024, and it showed that every single BMD ballot was counted correct. Every single ballot, every single contest. It was done for recertification. We also did the risk limiting audit where a human being will take a specific batch set and make sure every county does some to make sure that the outcome is at a 97 or 98% certainty at that point, which is now considered still the gold standard of auditing. So we have several pre-certification audits that balance out through the reconciliation, through the audits to the final outcome.
It's okay.
Could you repeat the question?
And it was written so well. It has. There has been lots of conversation about voting systems. We have machines. We have a paper backup that reconciles with the machines. What are your thoughts about paper only that would not have a check or balance?
Yeah, obviously, you probably can guess my position on that. I actually believe that we should have paper only. I believe that we should have hand-marked paper ballots. I don't mind technology. Like I said, when we tabulate, I mean, we can use a machine to tabulate, it's fine. But we can always have the original source document that is completed by the voter. I can't stress that enough, because that is going to ensure if it goes haywire, the whole election goes haywire, it's going to ensure that you always come back and go to the original source document and get the true, accurate outcome of that election. And I do believe in audits, but I don't believe in risk-limiting audits. A risk-limiting audit only captures a sample size of the group, and that sample size is supposed to be statistically significant to represent the overall. It's a statistics stage. I don't trust that. Our elections are too important. Count every ballot, every vote.
I'm going to recite to the United States Code number 9 that says that all elections for representatives shall be on written or paper printed ballots marked in pencil or pen or by lever machine, all other methods being of no account. Now, when we used to be able to use paper ballots, you'd have a voter come in, verify their identity, they'd get issued a ballot that had a stub on it, that had the serial number of the stub. They put the stub in the box, they'd go and they'd mark their ballot, they'd put the ballot in the ballot box, and at the end of the day, they'd count the number of stubs and the number of ballots, and they'd know whether or not they matched. If they didn't match, they'd try to figure out what the problem was. And then when they sit down with the callers and the talliers, they actually, in public, count the votes. They would know at the end of the cycle, after they finished all the count, who won, who lost, and et cetera. That was the end of it.
All right, everybody. I kind of told an entry. This is our last question. And it will go to Mr. King first. whatever the legislature decides to do about QR codes and or hand marked ballots, how will you make sure the local election teams are ready for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it takes effort, it takes planning, it takes training, communication. But what we're going to do is we're going to utilize emergency procedures, because right now, I just explained to everyone that the way we currently vote does not comply with our Georgia code. So under emergency procedures, I will be able to implement immediately and/or paper ballots, and that will eliminate the QR code scenario that we're behind on. Right now, the QR code is supposed to be removed by July 1st of this year. The legislature did nothing this last legislative session. So we're in limbo. So we do need a good leader right now. I wish we had a good leader in the Secretary of State's office explaining what's going to be done, giving the public calm and confidence that our leader has it under control. But right now we don't know. We're just in limbo. But that underscores why it's so important for you all to determine the best leader to take over this office, the best communicator to take over this office, and people and the person that can hold staff and themselves accountable.
This is a great opportunity for me to tell you that under Georgia law, the election administration as well as voter registration is an authority of the counties, and the Secretary of State has no legal authority to be in voter registration or in administration of elections. It's a county level function. So if the counties understood that, we'd be in a lot better shape to begin with. Immediately, again, HB 316 needs to be repealed right off the bat. But the other thing is about HB 316, it authorized the Dominion system as a pilot program. A pilot program means that it ends once it's found out not to be any good. The other thing is in Election Code 21-300 authorizes the counties to use paper ballots when any other method is not practicable or under other circumstances. The counties are the ones that have the authority to do elections the way that the people want them to do.
We are stuck in a situation where we have to follow the law. The law is in conflict with each other right now. I don't want to go to a court. The legislature has dropped the ball on this. When they passed this SB 189 2 years ago, the governor put $45 million to make the change. And when I met with them, I said, guys, if you put this money in here, I guarantee you one thing. They will not spend it to do the change here so that you want us to say they want to do. You know what they did? They took that $45 million and spent it on other stuff. The legislature has created this problem, and the legislature has to be the ones to find the fix for it. Otherwise, we're going to hand it over to either a state or a federal judge. And I don't trust that. You can hold your legislators accountable, talk to them. I mean, the state house had a plan, the state senate had a plan, and it went to Sunday down. Same thing happened last year when there was another couple of bills that could have fixed this, and the Senate adjourned early. I don't know who the Senate president is right now, and Nate, he should be asked why he hadn't fixed this yet. That's Lieutenant Governor. The reality is we have to follow the law, and there's not a clear path, and the Secretary gave us something. It takes a law.
All right, candidates, you have your wrap up for the evening, and we're going to start with closing from Mr. Metz.
Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for listening. I hope you took notes and are going to go home and do some research. I took my first oath as a Boy Scout when I was young, and it was, on my honor, I'll do my duty to do my best to God and my country. For my entire life, I've always been a servant. I took another oath in the U.S. Navy in 1979 to uphold the Constitution, and I try to do that every day. I've been fighting this election fight since 2012. I've been at the legislature, at the SEB meetings. I've been all over the state preaching that we're not following federal law, we're not following state law, we're not following the principles that were laid out for us by our founding fathers. And as we're approaching the 250th anniversary of the founding of America, we need to re-establish the fact that we, the people, are the government, and we are the people who are supposed to be telling the government how they're supposed to be serving us. And we need to be shoving the government back within their constitutional limitations.
One thing I think to tell y'all earlier is I'm a father of a 6-month-old, and I'm running statewide campaign, so I'm super tired. So if I wasn't as eloquent as I wanted to be, I apologize for that. But let's remember a few things. At the end of the day, we are all Republicans in this room. Come June, we're all in the same team fighting Democrats. I'm the only one in the state beating Stacey Abrams in court. I'm the only one who's fought Joe Biden's Justice Department and fought the entire world. Especially, they came after our citizenship check twice. Twice they came after our citizenship check, and I was the one who put the strategy together with our lawyers to make sure we could feed it back and know that Georgia has the best citizenship check in America. We're the first people to have a citizenship audit. We've done it twice now. We have the best and cleanest voting rolls in America. I know these people sound that, but we do because of the stupid NPRA that's in the way of this, which I will fight every day as Secretary of State with the federal government to change. I'm the only candidate here. It's me, a road tough here for Republicans. I'm the only candidate here I think that will win the general election and make sure we have election integrity and make sure Republicans are in charge of Secretary of State's office. I need your vote on May 19th.
The challenge is this, right? We have a group that thinks our elections are fine. And then we have most of us who know that there's issues with our elections. The challenge is making sure that we have a leader that can meld both groups together, that can bring unity to both groups. My solutions will do that. The Democrats, believe it or not, even like the hand-marked ballots. Why don't our Republicans like hand-marked ballots? Especially when it's the people that's concerned about it. Our government is made for the people, by the people, but answerable to the people. That's what Daniel Webster said in the 1850s. Answerable to the people. My solutions are just answering the people. I'm a business guy. I will bring business processes into the Secretary of State's office because I'll get things done and I'll hold my staff accountable and you all will hold me accountable. At the end of the day, we just want somebody that's going to do what they say they're going to do. On the Walmart business, that's what it says. Do what you say you're going to do. That will differentiate you from everybody else. Thank you.
All right, everyone. I think this has been a great end to our forum season, and please give these candidates a huge round of applause.
I want to thank Terry for taking over the forums from me. It was time for me to retire. She did a fantastic job. You'll give her a round of applause.